everyone. Welcome to our Bible study for Ruth 1. I'm Hannah, and I'm going to lead this study. This week we read Ruth 1, so we're starting a new book. Before we get into the chapter, I have a little bit of background information about the book. So the writer of the book of Ruth is unknown, but the story is about Ruth, so it's about her life. I found it interesting that this is one of the only two books named after a woman. Does anybody know the second book named after a woman?
Esther.
Yes. Correct. Esther, which maybe I'll do that one next. But Ruth is a Moabite, so she lives in the land of Moab. She's a Gentile. She's not a Jew, so that's just a little bit of background. The location of the book is mainly in Bethlehem, but in the first chapter you see they go off somewhere else. Freeze a little bit. Okay, before we go, I found this part interesting too, because not every time in the book they'll give you the names and the meanings of the names. So like if you go to the little footnotes, it told you some of the names and the meanings. So Elimelech is Naomi's husband, and his name meant "my God is king." Naomi's name meant pleasant or delightful. And then they have two sons, but their names weren't so nice. It was Malon, which means weak or sick, and they have Chilion, which is tired or dying. So we have "my God is the king," pleasant, and sick and tired. So those are some of the characters in this chapter. So we'll get into some of the questions about the chapter. So what disaster struck Bethlehem that made them leave? Eddie?
Hunger.
Yes, right. There was a famine. So we don't know how long the famine lasted for. It didn't say exactly, but we know that it caused hardships to this family, which caused them to leave.
We're not supposed to answer to the end.
So what does the famine tell us about the nation of Israel? Brandon?
It's going through a hard time.
What more specifically about their behavior?
Oh, they're sinning.
Right, correct. So if you reference other chapters, Ezekiel 14:13 tells us, if a country sins against me by being unfaithful, I stretch out my hand against it and cut off its food supply and send famine. So it's pretty straightforward. He warned you that if you're going to be against me, if you're sinning, this is going to happen. He specifically promised that there would always be plenty in the land of Israel if they were obedient. But this just tells us that they were in a cycle of sin. And then we can relate this to our lives because God allows hardships to come into our lives, and that just brings us closer to him, or should want us to bring us closer to him. When they left Bethlehem, where did they go? Nina?
Moab.
Correct, Moab, right? And then I got this map, and it's just kind of a little bit about showing you from Jerusalem to Moab. So it's just kind of a little bit of geography. And Moab, does anyone know what country that would be considered today?
That would be Jordan.
Yeah, correct, Jordan. All right, so in Moab, some things happen. What happens to, I don't want to tell him, Elimelech? Ralph?
Die.
Correct, he dies. Who? Abel? Okay, sorry. I'm sorry, Abel. All right. The two sons, they married two girls. Does anyone know their names?
It's one of them.
Yes. And the other one is
Oh.
close, Orpah. Good. Ruth and Orpah. And
I don't know if you knew this, but Oprah is named after this. Her mother didn't know how to spell it. And this is a true story.
That's interesting.
She cheered that.
Maybe I'll do my check.
What's the two letters? But then what happens to the two sons?
They died.
Correct, Abel. They died. So then
That was the end, by the way.
Ruth, Naomi, and Orpah are now left as widows. So why did Naomi, after they were left as widows, Naomi made the decision to go back to Moab?
Back to Bethlehem.
Back to Bethlehem, thanks. Why did she decide to go back home? What was happening? Ralph?
She was sad and she was complaining the way God had treated her, you know?
Yeah,
she
right?
was very, very satisfied with everything that's going on.
So she was unhappy, but the food started coming back into Bethlehem, right? So this is a direct quote from the chapter. The Lord had come to my aid of his people by providing food for them. So she wanted to be a part of the good thing God was doing. I wrote, in our lives, many people hear good things about what God is doing and they want it, right? They want to do it, but they're not willing to put the work in. So they're just going to sit there and complain. Naomi could have stayed in Moab and complained, but she knew to trust in the Lord, follow him and follow his plan, even though I don't think she was fully convinced in the beginning. So where did Naomi tell Orpah and Ruth to go when she was deciding to go back to Bethlehem?
Back to their moms.
Correct, right? Right back to your mother's home.
Yeah.
How does Orpah respond? So initially they both like argue with her a little bit, but eventually, how does Orpah respond? What does she do? Hold on, let me see.
Goes to her moms.
Correct. She goes back home, right? She leaves. How does Ruth respond? Ralph?
She said
She stays.
Naomi go.
Correct, right? Thank you, Deanna, or Renee, or Ralph. You're both correct. She stayed with Naomi. Okay. So why do you think Ruth was so persistent on going with Naomi? She wouldn't turn down. Like my verse said, I'm gonna go where you go, I'll stay where you stay with your people and your God. Why do you think she was so persistent on this, Renee?
Because she has fallen in love with Naomi's faith.
Right, Naomi was such a good example of following God, and it made such an impact on her actions. She didn't have an easy life. You're following somebody that just lost both of her sons and her husband, but she still honored and loved the Lord, and that influenced Ruth so much. Ruth was willing to forsake everything she knew as a child and grew up to embrace God. And then I just noted that this should be something we should embody. People should want to look at our life and be so influenced that they should want what we have, right? They should want us to trust, or they should want to trust in God the way we trust in him, not even just in hard times, in all the times. This is the quote. I just liked it, so I like to put it back in. When they returned to Bethlehem, what did Naomi tell people to call her? This kind of goes back to the meanings of the names. Nina?
Mara.
Correct, Mara. And Mara means bitter. Correct. So this is kind of the start of Ruth becoming a little bit bitter, not necessarily towards God. She didn't really she still trusted in him. But she wasn't gonna go home. Her name used to mean pleasant.
She didn't want to remember what happened, that's why she wanted to be called a new name.
She went to be honest back at home, and she was like, here I am, and I'm kind of bitter. She kind of says, God destroyed my life, but here I am, I'm still gonna follow him. But then she, like I said, she knew that his plan, she's not bitter against him, and she says the solution is to go closer to him and not further away, which is something that we should do all the time. I think I just wanted to note this. In verse 21, she says, I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? The Lord has afflicted me. The Almighty has brought misfortune upon me. So in this scenario, Naomi only talks about God as it relates to the bad things in her life. So she goes, I went away full, but the Lord brought me back empty. But we never see her thanking God for sending her away full. It's always blame when you don't have what you wanted, right?
Complaining.
So it's okay to let God know your emotions, especially when we don't have control over things. Because when we don't have control, we get scared. And we have to remember that we have control over how we respond. So we can sit there and blame God. God, why did you do this to me?
Preacher was saying today, who has changed?
Exactly.
Me
right?
or God?
Right, God, why did you do this to me? Or we can grow closer to him and say, I don't understand this, but I trust you in your plan. And that's hard a lot of the times, but we have to remember our plan isn't always God's plan. So then just the main takeaways from the chapter I took were, it's possible for God to accomplish things forever if we turn towards him in our feelings and our actions. Like when Naomi went back to Bethlehem because she trusted in God. And that if we follow our heart and follow God, we can influence so many people around us and gain so many believers. But that's what I have for Ruth chapter 1. Do you have Renee?
I just wanted to say that most people know, but this Ruth, who was not a Jew, she was the great grandmother of Jesus Christ by blood.
Yeah.
Yes,
I didn't know that.
So that people know that God is trying to say Gentile and Jews as well, everyone.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions I can try to answer? If not, I'm gonna stop recording.